We're live. Okay. This is Senate Appropriations. It's April 9th, and we are continuing our slog through the budget. And we have Doug Farnham here, who's the Chief Recovery Officer. You've had a lot of titles in your time in state government. And there are a number of areas in which ARPA funds and maybe other funds are being proposed in either the governor's budget or ultimately what the House might have passed. We're just trying to identify areas that might have, you've looked at it, said that raises a concern. I know that we heard from the Department of Corrections because we wanted to use ARPA money for payroll and free up general fund. But then that reduces the general fund base as you build 26, and they're worried that in fact that it could leave them a hole. And so maybe there's some language that we need to add when we're doing that kind of conversion of funds to give assurances that that is really one time and that the piece is protected or something will work out. So we're aware of that concern that was articulated in a memo we got from the Agency of Human Services. But perhaps some other things in terms of reversions or how we make sure that we end up making, and I know you're tracking it very closely to make sure that we're not returning federal funds and how we can address it. So if you want to just share kind of your observations or any feedback you want to give us, we'd appreciate it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Doug Farnham, Chief Recovery Officer for the state of Vermont. Yes, I have had a lot of roles, more dealing with federal funds than I ever anticipated before starting work for the state. But so in the budget construct, speaking to the House passed version at this point, so any references I make will be to the House passed version to avoid potential confusion. Section E106, A, B, and C. That's really the core of our recovery funding construct. And
that's not in, that's just the web report, not, it's not the full budget. If you wanna.
Sorry, yes.
E, I guess,
E106. And I just want to make sure the committee, some of this language.
From page 123. The agency shall structure any existing program, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, that section A is very high level. It directs the administration to structure the program in the way that it would be most eligible under the Treasury final rule. So that 31 CFR Part 35 is the Treasury final rule for ARPA and allows us to reallocate unspent funds across government units in a net neutral manner. That is extremely important because it allows us to take a program that may not be eligible under the Treasury rule under the Vermont state statute description, apply it to Treasury under a different description like payroll eligibility, and then move the funds across to allow that program to.
And that is in fact the ultimate mechanism to make sure we use all the money.
Yes, that is the linchpin, and we actually received on March 29th, we received some very hardening guidance from Treasury that clarified personnel costs in 2025 and 2026 were in fact eligible, and that there would be a way for the reporting mechanism to report that. That element was contradictory and unclear in their previous guidance, so I think a lot of states were pestering them about that. So that clarification makes me feel much more comfortable about
this language here.
Yes, this language here and the ability to continue to do that curing into 25 and 26. We still have to get every dollar.
That's in federal fiscal years, or are you talking?
Sorry, speaking in calendar years at that point, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Only because the ARPA fund is organized along 12/31/2024 is an important deadline, and then 12/31/2026 is an important deadline. So it doesn't match state or federal fiscal years to make things simpler, I guess.
Well, it's nice, comforting to know what we've done in the past that isn't subject to being challenged. But
Yeah, so this section A is, no concerns with the language as it is. That will give us the tools in the administration to make sure the money is obligated correctly according to the state legislative intent. And it's also designed not to allow the administration to, shift money away to different programs or create new programs. That's, I think it's properly constrained and focused on curing specifically is generally how I refer to it.
And it's not a new concept. We've done it in the past.
Yes.
Fortunately, we have one department that has general funds.
The rules for how we do it with
That's
this one are more complicated, so I will have to be doing business unit by business unit transfers across this, the entirety of state government to make this work. It won't be as straightforward as DSC. So, Madam Chair, the concern that you pointed out by Department of Corrections, I will work within the administration to make sure everyone knows this is going to be a statewide mechanism that's going to have to be it's our budgeting process and what is based will have to, it cannot take that into account. This is not intended to affect their base allocations in any way, and I can work with the budgeting office to make sure that,
And I'd like
That's
some language and just make that clear.
yes,
If once you have that, you can propose something that provides some comfort. And also it's a statement of intent. Is your tie, it looks like perhaps, it looks,
it's some random equations and formulas and.
at first I thought it was the
Almost
galaxy.
It was
I thought it was
almost
an eclipse tie.
Yes.
There we go.
Um,
I'm on a mechanics, no, multi-tecto.
All right, well, getting back to cold cash here, and this is the first 40 million that governor has proposed to be set aside for FEMA match,
Yes,
and the House agreed with that. And I'm
Yes.
assuming you like it too.
yes, absolutely. And one thing I would say here that's important in this language is that it would absolutely be prioritized towards FEMA match and support hazard mitigation. I know that some of our communities have concerns about not all of their projects fitting into the FEMA hazard mitigation program. So this amount would allow us to prioritize funding all of the projects that can fit through the FEMA. So we get that 3-to-1 return on investment. And then any funds that are left over of those 36 million would then support those projects that the flood resilient communities fund generally done.
That's really good to hear because it connects very much with the bill we passed, 310.
Yes,
And the proposal was to do grants to municipalities, and it seems like what this is has the potential for mitigation. So it seems like this language here is reflective of the desire to, if there's money, to do something to assist municipalities with, in this case, flood mitigation seems to be top of the list, but could be others.
Would this only be for FEMA approved hazardous mitigation? Would it be like a match for if once the FEMA says that they're gonna approve hazardous?
It should be or, maybe it should be
Yes.
or. I'm thinking, maybe
How are you?
and means both, and, I mean, the two have to go together. In other words, don't you need 36 million for FEMA match or municipal support for hazard mitigation?
or might clarify
And
it.
or,
I was reading it as a list of this and that, but
but since you're
this
only
or
two,
that might be even clearer, Madam Chair.
I think, send Virgil, go
So
ahead.
do you think this FEMA goes with the second part, because it's a
No,
FEMA?
no, I
municipal
don't
support
think-
for hazard mitigation? So it doesn't have to be
That,
FEMA approved, because there's FEMA approved hazard mitigation, correct, right?
correct. That, the omission of FEMA in front of hazard mitigation in the second clause was intentional.
For the purpose you said, some things might be necessary, but wouldn't qualify for FEMA match. That's why I was thinking about the 310 connection.
Yes,
And so I think we need to say or, I don't know where grading is, but it means that there are two possible uses, of the 36 million.
right, because, based on the BAA, appropriation of general fund for FEMA match for state direct liability, we estimate we'll need another 7 million or so of of general fund for state match for direct liabilities. So that would come out of this 36, and then the remainder would go towards, well, we would split it and sort of manage the expense as it comes in. We may not get
Would
that
you
much.
run it through the ACCD program, or would you run it through your
Right.
shop, or depending on where the need is?
Well, municipal support might depend on the proposed use, so if it's transportation related like a culvert, maybe, I don't know how you would administer it, it's interesting.
So.
Through emergency management.
Yes, right now, so if S 310 wasn't passed, then the most likely program would be the Flood Resilient Communities Fund for VM to distribute this. I've spoken with them about, this language gives them a bit of discretion as long as it's related to hazard mitigation. The community disaster program in 310 would give them more guardrails and more specifics, but it would work very well.
Could be a potential funding source.
Yes.
Was there, but. The mechanics of this, with public safety. This work shall be allocated, so it would go to public safety, it wouldn't necessarily go into that new fund that got created in 310. It could very well be grants that go out to municipalities. For hazard mitigation activities,
Yes.
and it wouldn't have to go into a special fund.
Correct, Madam Chair. Based on how successful we are with our FEMA program this year, they can integrate it, they can do 2 parallel programs. I think there are a couple different ways that they could approach it.
Senator Blanchard, I was pondering our future.
I was looking at number 3.
Oh, well, we're still.
Are we gonna continue and go through?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait, I'm fine.
No, but this is very helpful because it just shows, kind of the nexus in between the discussion and we talked about in one bill and where, there seems to be a fairly good likelihood that there would be some money, to support those municipalities.
Yes, and being aware of the state of general revenues and general need, the goal here was to keep as much pressure off the general fund for our recovery specific efforts and kind of weave them into our ARPA. Because that was pandemic recovery, so they're part of the same effort in the long run.
Okay. Sorry. Got a meeting at 4, lots of these.
Maybe person.
No, let's go on. So, number 2, that's paying for the audit. I can imagine it's gonna be with all the millions we've got, the audit costs are significant.
The audit costs and honestly, most of that 4 million just goes to maintaining the limited service staffing levels necessary to respond to the audit requests and it's not outside expense. Generally, that's going to go primarily to limited service positions.
So I'm gonna go through, it seems to me, we all agree, we agree with the intent, I'm gonna close that out. And then, with the number 1, we're deleting and changing it to or, so that we realize there could be 2 purposes. And then that's okay, once we've made that change. And then 4 million to support the audit, which, we know that we have to do. Now we're down to 3.
Number,
3 is, so once again, using money to address housing.
yeah, I'm wondering, on line 21, manufactured homes, that's trailers, I would presume. Is there something that's gonna get them out of the floodplain and then proper locations, anywhere in here? So that we aren't throwing good money in bad.
That's a great question, Senator. There's nothing explicit in the language, but I know VHCB does work. When they make investments, they make sure they're working with the local floodplain regulations for that community. I know that there's been a discussion with Senate Natural Resources about statewide floodplain standards.
Yeah, that's 213.
Yes. So that does tie together. And I do think that's the balance we have to strike, right? It's not investing So I think that, that statewide architecture could be standardized a little bit better in that regard. I don't think there's a huge risk of VHCB making investments in housing that doesn't meet floodplain
No.
standards.
I'm gonna hold that because we've asked, our housing committee to kind of look at, and what has happened is we've got housing in a variety of places, and so it's all gonna have to be, consolidated, so I'm gonna hold that. And
that probably would go along,
number 4.
yeah, and relating, that to Senator Starr's question. We also talk about tiny houses, small houses. We think not just about, recovery residences, but we also think about step-down beds for mental health and also for those with disabilities, independent living. So was that considered, were those considered at all?
I would have to say, Senator, I'm not certain because 1 and 2 came from the administration, 3 and 4 were added by the House. The only recommendation I would make is we would prefer to see number 4 in third position over the VHCD. So that's a slight quibble, right? That, we think that revolving loan fund, the rental revolving loan fund is doing a lot of
All
good.
right, so, and then also, we have received a request for, first-time home buyers from VHFA.
Yeah.
And that is on the list, that we're going to be asking Senate Housing to take a look at and appropriate
I
for.
would just say in my conversations with HFA, that of 1 million for first-time home buyers, they would put as a higher priority than the number 4 on this list. There, and it would even like
Who
to
would say again?
DHFA.
Well, I can believe they'd like to be higher in the priority list.
Yeah, but well,
Unless I missed something.
no, they also get the 25 million in number 4. And what they're saying is that didn't get included as the first time home buyer. And,
Well, we'll ask the other committee and maybe they want to split the baby, so to speak,
Yeah,
so that you're not doing.
and that's what they would suggest.
Yeah, all right, well, we can have some more discussion on that. But we're holding 3 and 4, because we want to look at housing, altogether. Senator Bertram.
Okay, that.
This is a total of $95 million.
That's the,
Is that your prediction?
No, Senator. So I do think it should be acknowledged that I think we will likely secure the $36 million.
Right.
After that, it's.
After that, it's
Yeah, I got this.
certainly far from a guarantee.
Very good.
I think the main thing there is we don't want to cut programs short. Like we have a lot of water investment still in the works. It would be self-defeating to pull that money back.
So even though it's not worded this way in this part, these are basically like after number 1 contingent list. And the way you're speaking about it is that it's an order, but it doesn't say that.
Correct, Senator. That's the way we've historically read this structure of statutory language,
Number 1 is number 1.
right? So we wouldn't exercise any discretion in the administration to jump around that list at all, or,
Would you be averse to making specific?
no, I know our,
What, that make the decision?
No.
Say that it shall be in this order.
Clarify that this is the.
The order.
Yeah, for the, following purposes or in the following order or something like that. So we can wordsmith that a little bit, in terms of making sure that the sequence is in fact the priority money. All right. Just, even though it seems like that's how it's been interpreted and applied in the past, but should people want. Okay.
And you're hoping to know, you're hoping to know by September kind of timeframe about the ARPA reversions. You won't know until like sometime in the fall.
yes, Senator, the if this language were to pass with some clarifications and the basic meat of it was the same. After the session, we plan to send a warning out to all programs that the September 30th treasury report, any funds that are unobligated on that report will be evaluated for reversion. It wouldn't be a guarantee of reversion because we do have that last 3 months, but we need to get started immediately after that September 30th report, which comes into us in the middle of October. So
We know
Over
you're keeping very close tabs on, so, I know people are hoping that the money will be lots and lots. But it's all appropriated, and so it's just a matter of timing and making sure that, if something's obligated and needs more time, then you're gonna do that conversion. And then, anything that's available would be, allocated, and we'll just make sure in this, in the priority listing as follows or something. And then, other questions about this? This is all related to ARPA. This has nothing to do with end of the year contingent, appropriation. I just need to make that clear what we're looking at here. Other, sections.
so C under E106, that gives us the tools to revert, reallocate ARPA in 2025 and 2026 with the approval of the Joint Fiscal Committee. So Treasury guidance does allow us to move money as long as it was obligated on December 31st of 2024. It allows us to move that to a different program down the road. So if a project falls through, Vermont won't automatically lose that money. I think that's very important. We will have the opportunity to put it to a different project, and the administration would recommend the project and JFC would approve or not, right? So I think that that's a critical mechanism as far as continuing to spend the money and keep it in Vermont in 2025 and 2026.
Questions on that? So are we all comfortable with the language? And also fiscal committee, approval. We'll agree with that, House, and the governor had requested that language as well.
Yes. Yes, this language is.
Oh, this is a love fest, then, I just like. to put that up. Okay,
All right, and I'm trying to read my section references so I don't make people jump around too far in the paper version unnecessarily. One section to touch on really quickly is E100.3.
I thought you were gonna do that, that's on page 122, it's a limited service. They shall be abolished.
I would just point out that there are no, with the exception of one small appropriation in PGS, the funds for the limited service positions aren't tied directly to those specific positions. So abolishing them wouldn't actually free up any funds.
This gratuitous language,
I think it might be unnecessary, Senator. If it wasn't removed, it could at least have a 90-day or 120-day grace period where remain vacant for at least 90 days or 120 days. The way it reads currently, if we have someone leave, which I had someone leave to take another position last week, if they left in June and the position was vacant on that day of June 30th, then you could read the language to say we would have to eliminate that position even though it's a critical position.
They could quit until June 29th.
Yes.
The next day you have to.
so,
But I would just want to be clear, it will not free up any funds as it's currently written.
do you think that was the intent? We don't know, but, and I'm not gonna try, I guess what you're saying is it creates more problems than it might, solve.
And say the Secretary of Administration currently has the authority to not choose to extend a position, so. Limited service positions expire every year when the Secretary chooses not to extend them. But
Do we actually have, we've actually created a separate ARPA fund.
so the Agency of Administration asked for, in the first round of ARPA appropriations, we had $6.5 million for general administrative costs and then $10.5 million. So we have 17 million that is for administrative costs that can't easily be sourced to a specific program. And a good example of that is A&R licensing and permitting positions. They work on whatever projects get pushed their way. They don't know if it's going to be an ARPA project when it gets pushed their way. So that was intended to be a backstop, and that's how we've been using it. And it also funded the guidehouse contract, which I have scaled down massively to save costs.
Well, I'm just trying to store my rather feeble brain. It says reverted to the ARPA fund. Did we
Oh.
create a special ARPA fund? We've appropriated ARPA all over the state government. So we're reverting. I just want to make sure, I think what you're saying is the language doesn't serve any purpose and your recommendation is not to include it. For the reasons you've talked about. I was just reading and it says shall be reverted to this fund. And so I'm not even sure.
We did create just envision, we created a special fund.
Did we create one in statute?
No. But we needed a place to put the federal
I
funds.
understand that, yeah.
So,
All right, Wendy,
Should be gone.
I think we can, and if there's a compelling reason, it can always be added, but we'll just remove that for now, based on your testimony that it perhaps creates a lot more problems than, and what you think is attempting to be addressed here, in fact, isn't a problem because of the other flexibility the secretary has.
yes, we can certainly work through it, and there are a number of limited service positions that are critical, and
Sure.
losing those would be pretty damaging. We just have to go back to joint fiscal and ask for it to be recreated. So I know, Madam Chair, that you already talked about section D 102, the $5 million. This was reverted from DCF, Office of Economic Opportunity Weatherization Program, put towards Department of Corrections payroll. I think POC's already registered one concern there. Yeah. It's not our preferred method of balancing state's books, but I'm not going to say I have massive concerns. That is technically possible to do that. Obviously, we're recommending doing it in other places, so.
You can't, purity is not, 100%. We're pragmatists, I guess, okay, yeah. And that's the source of their concern about, it impacting their base as opposed to freeing up the general fund. Any other areas that we should?
Just I don't know that anyone needs to look at the language. I'll just describe it very quickly, but section E 100.1 creates this chief performance officer position. That's tied to recovery because that position was never actually created. Duties were created in statute. But the position didn't exist as its own position. And the chief recovery officer is likely going to be that chief performance officer is currently using the executive director position in AOA, which we intend to use the chief recovery officer in that executive director position after the budget passes. So we're just, there are many statutory sections that reference this position. It's a persistent position, so we felt it was time to.
I'm not following you, Doug.
No, sorry.
On page 120, chief performance officer
Yes,
is created.
yes.
Now, we have a chief,
Yeah, what is that person called?
chief, what's the other person?
So,
Who gives us a big thick report that.
yes,
And has very, how we,
I apologize. I explained that very poorly, Madam Chair. Justin Kenny has been the chief performance officer. Sue Zeller was the chief
Yeah.
performance officer before him.
and so when we're creating something else, I read it and I said, well, we already done this. Is this a different one?
No, it is the same position, Madam Chair. What happened is all the duties were created in statute over the years. Well, duties have been added to the chief performance officer, but the position itself was never created as an exempt position in Vermont statute. So that's what this position does, what this language does is, yes,
All right,
we've always had to have that chief performance officer live.
so
in
this is something
someone
the
else's
administration is
position.
recommending that it's a cleanup.
So
Yes, it's a cleanup.
there's not the money involved.
No, it's already a funded position, that's, but we never created it.
And is this what these are the 5 things that the chief performance officer is responsible for?
Yes,
So this is currently happening.
It's
yes.
just formalizing something that seems to have,
And the chief performance officer has been paid out of the Agency of Administration central office budget. So there won't be any financial change there. It's always been in the payroll. It just, and the chief recovery officer is generally paid for with ARPA and, FEMA funds.
which is you.
Yes.
So
So this is a different position. This is an existing function. It's just creating the job, formalizing your job. It's being done. No additional money.
No additional money behind it.
It's really almost a conversion because you must have taken an existing position.
Is the chief recovery officer a limited service position, like
No.
once we recover from?
No, it's a permanent exempt.
No, not the
It's-
performance, the recovery.
Oh, recovery.
Our intention
We're
at this
never gonna
point
do recovery.
is that we would use the executive director position in the agency of administration, which is normally not filled. Historically, that position has remained open and is kind of activated for odd things like giant flood.
And then you just tackle it.
Well, you probably, if you have protection back to classified service.
I do not, Chair.
No.
I took
It's a good thing.
an exempt job when I was about 7.5 years in, so no protection.
So you assume when the recovery funds are gone, which will take at least 26, 27 to close it out, they would just move you back to that ED position. Or you're gonna worry about that when you get there.
I think the bulk of what the state needs me to do should be passed within the next year to year and a half. I'm hoping to have all the systems set up so that we could close out ARPA at the end of 2026 without my oversight if necessary. So I think by the end of 2025, I should have made myself obsolete.
That doesn't.
Well, that means we're recovered.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, at least on the path. to it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, with your background in government, I'm sure you work.
Hope you work in
there'll be-
retirement.
So, all right, so this is really a conversion and formalizing the work of the chief performer, the function. So, I guess we'll close that out. All right, we also, the commissioner of health stuff is heavy, so he's out in the hall. So any other sections you want to bring to our attention while we have you here, Dawn?
One section very quickly, section 95 is on the municipal technical assistance program.
Yes.
It adds a catch-all category to that program, which is one I administer under the recovery.
Municipal project that is capital in nature or an
Yes.
activity that is a precursor or requirement to taking on a capital project.
So this program was created last year in the Budget Adjustment Act, $3 million of general fund. This language does not cause any harm. However, we're collecting the final statements of work and we will have essentially all of the $3 million obligated to specific projects. So the only risk here of having the language in is that it creates a perception that there's still money to be allocated out to different projects. And so it's a very small ball concern, but
But you asked for it?
House Commerce, we did not ask for this, but House Commerce suggested the language and we said it wouldn't harm anything. And then we got a large number of statements of work after they asked the question that really will appear to consume the rest of the program. So the program's fully subscribed and I think it's almost a communications issue, Madam Chair, that it wouldn't hurt anything significant, leave it in, but it might be simpler if it was taken out.
All right, because there isn't any money to take on additional tasks.
Right.
Okay,
And then,
well, we can remove it and based on the fact that it's language that has no relevance because there's no money. I mean, that, you don't have more money than you've got requests to, for its use according to what's in the statute. So committee got a,
This is the municipal technical assistant, that
So-
section 95.
yeah, the only thing they were adding to existing was E, and it creates as though so another activity would be eligible. What I think what we're saying is it's totally irrelevant because there isn't any money. You can make a whole lot more eligible, but there's no money to fund anything more than what we have in the pipeline.
Right.
So I think as long as we're saying the funding is fully obligated, so expanding its use really, is irrelevant. We could remove that section.
95.
Yeah, because all it did was add another eligible, uh, expenditure. Okay. Well, that would really be something, make you think you've got something when you don't.
That's,
We do that, huh?
sorry, I'm sure, yes.
Thank you.
One more.
Section B, 1102, A2, this is the general fund fiscal year 24 contingency.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to say that 3.5 million for flood related communities fund. So I support that as a recovery effort, would have no problem with that staying in. I would
and
just,
that was to elevate, homes that,
yes. I would just point out for the committee that, you know, with with Vermont Emergency Management administering this, they would try to put any elevation through the FEMA process first to see if we could secure federal support. We wouldn't jump straight to paying for something ourselves because that would be financially wasteful. I'm sorry.
do we have language that allows that to happen? One would always assume that we would not be using general fund. That would be the last resort. Do we need to put something in?
I'd have to go back and look at the language that created the Flood Resilient Communities Fund. Because I know it wasn't created as a special fund, Madam Chair, but it was created. And its general purpose and its accepted practice is it's used after FEMA is accessed, right? It's used for things that FEMA won't do.
Mhm.
So that's the practice. I don't know how firm that language is in the statutory language that created it. So I think that's a good question, Madam Chair, and I can't certainly say.
So
Just saying FEMA might pay for it, so we should let them.
I think what we're basically saying that if a a project is eligible for federal funds, that funding source will be used first. Something along that line. It's pretty standard
I
language.
guess the only problem is, it's one of the issues is how long do you wait to determine whether it's FEMA eligible?
The FEMA eligibility has actually been going pretty quickly, Senator. Whether or not they'll do something, that has been moving quickly. It's getting through the entire process, but I would point out, whether or not you use FEMA, you do have to go through the same environmental and historical preservation for national floodplain insurance standards. So elevation is a difficult process that it takes a lot of time whether or not you use FEMA. FEMA does add time, but I don't think it adds as much as everyone assumes the FEMA participation adds. I think it's all of the other regulatory hurdles that it's clear that add up.
Why don't you take a look at that?
That's, yeah.
I can talk fast.
Those were all the sections I wanted to speak to, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, for coming in, giving us some more background on why and what's in here. Other questions, please? No, thank you very much, Doug, and, if we can maybe explore a bit more, make sure that we to the extent feasible, I don't know, I mean, so it just, I'm concerned that people would say, well, you know, we'd get a decision 2 years from now, and that just isn't gonna work, I'm living on my second floor because my kitchen got flooded out, I mean, we've heard those stories, so, I think we wanna make sure that, people's immediate needs somehow don't get tied up in a very lengthy process. On the other hand, we want to make sure that if federal funds are available in a timely fashion, we use them first. Thank you, Committee. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. So if you see Commissioner Levine loitering in the hall, tell him
He's
we're ready. Yeah, I know he's out there, stuck his head in. I just don't know if he's still right outside the door.
Here he is.
Thank you for coming in person. It's good to see you.
Hey, pocket money here.
I know, that usually brings people out, doesn't it? We, wanted to give you time to, talk to us. You submitted a memo of concern, about some of the things in the budget, and also I think it tied into, maybe the opioid abatement, and, so if you could,
Yeah.
and I'm looking here for your email among all the rest. If you could, well, in the absence of my being able to find it, if you would tell us why you wanted to come here and what is concerning you and what you would like us to do,
Absolutely.
to make you happy, that would be a good start.
I have probably less than 2 minutes of comments regarding prevention programs
Okay.
for substance use. And then I'm happy to answer other questions you might have about opioid abatement and so on.
So you want to just put yourself on the record
Yes,
and we'll get
Dr. Mark
started then.
Levine, Commissioner. We're dealing specifically with section E.313
B or E?
E.
E.
313 of H883. And I'm really going to speak in favor of.
153, 313, it's page 150, page 153.
You're gonna
And
see,
it starts, there's, the advisory committee is on 152, but comments are all on the appropriation section.
so I'm
Everybody
gonna
got it?
speak in favor of the administration's recommendation to provide $3 million in base funding for substance use prevention programs. So if we go back to when Vermont legalized cannabis, recreational cannabis sales, 2022, the General Assembly and the administration agreed on the need for early and stable investments in evidence-based substance misuse prevention programs to help the young people most at risk for adverse impacts resulting from cannabis use. Recognizing that these programs should be available in advance of the legal sales, the General Assembly and the administration committed to appropriating $3 million per year to fund these programs. Going now to the governor's fiscal
Talking about the
year,
community coalition.
that's the prime purpose of those
Okay,
funds.
when you're saying programs, we have so
Yes.
many programs, I just want to make sure.
Right, these are predominantly the community coalition
Okay.
programs
Okay, 3.
across the state. So if we go to the fiscal year 2025 executive budget recommendation is to make that commitment to prevention permanent with a $3 million general fund based budget for substance misuse prevention, which makes possible the long-term investment in community-led evidence-based strategies that have been demonstrated through data to reduce substance misuse by young people. If we look at the House version of the fiscal year 2025 budget bill, it proposes to continue using one-time appropriations to provide over half of the committed prevention funding. And it opts to fund that one-time portion from the opioid abatement special fund. What that recommendation does is it ignores the legislative intent to direct cannabis sales excise revenue as the stable, long-term source of funding for substance use prevention programs. And it relies on the use of funds specifically intended to reduce the harms associated with the irresponsible sale and distribution of opioids, which reduces in the end the resources available for harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. So a failure to make a long-term general fund base budget commitment of at least $3 million annually to substance use prevention programs will have a measurable impact on the state's success in preventing the known harms to young people resulting from cannabis.
So let me, okay, so what you're basically concerned about is the goal and the 3 million for the community, coalitions.
The goal is to come from the
To come
cannabis
back,
excise
right, it's-
sales revenue.
Which would be a stable ongoing.
Right.
And.
We preempted that early because we wanted things in place. And everyone made that $3 million commitment, knowing that it wouldn't be coming from general funds forever, it would be coming from other sources.
And I haven't seen the estimates, but obviously we know that we allocated up to a maximum of 10 million for prevention. So the 3 million was part of that overall plan.
Yeah.
And so the house,
They put
Um,
2.2.
Used 800,000, 799,000, it's 1410 general fund. It didn't get to the 3 million section.
well, I guess,
Right.
They only funded 2.2 million and the governor wanted 3 million. I think that's what.
That's right.
the 2.205,
2.2.
shall be granted, okay.
So 1410 one time?
$1.4 million, $1.4 million.
Yeah, million.
Right.
That's
One
one,
point four one.
and the other is opioid abatement, which I suppose is.
This section,
So that 1.1, does that come out of the general fund?
no,
Point four.
well, what we have here is the 3 million should come from the cannabis fund.
Well,
And
that,
if we'll be funding consistent with legislative intent, assuming, but there's some people who have short memories about legislative intent, as we know from a prior debate that we've had. So your concern would be, first of all, I'm trying to, this is one-time money. In this section, Amy, this is all one time. So what you're concerned about is where the use of one, not only is it less, but it's one time as opposed to 3 million ongoing
It's
basis.
a permanent solution.
Yes, And why did you testify to the,
Long before they came up with finalists of the budget, yes.
okay, so Senator West,
In my conversations with, the fifth floor and Monica Hutt, she has suggested that there should be, the 1/3 or the 30% that is dedicated to that ought, in cannabis funds, ought to be a separate, cannabis prevention special fund. Where it went, instead of going into the general fund, and it would eliminate some of the confusion around all of this going forward. And she.
it's already coming from one fund to another though. It's coming into a cannabis fund. And then the fund, we're appropriating out of that fund. So how many different, we need a fund for the fund?
Well, but it goes into the general fund and then it creates confusion against
It
that.
could come directly to,
Yeah.
Well,
but the important thing is that it not go through the opioid abatement process.
well, they're conflating two things.
Well, yes,
That wasn't the legislative
but,
intent.
yes, but the confusion arises when you start appropriating out of the general fund here too.
I understand. Multiple levels. I'm here to clarify, not confuse. I always strive.
That's what everybody says.
Yeah, I always strive to do that.
All right,
But
so-
I'm just following the law from last time around, which says cannabis excise revenue goes to the prevention.
So they're giving you 2.2 shall be granted for the prevention lead organization. And that consists of 795 opioid abatement and then the 1.4 general fund. Is that, I can't add it up in my head, so.
Yep.
And, appropriated in B 1100 and B 313 shall be for substance use, misuse prevention. Okay, well, we're going to, obviously, we hear your concern. I know that both Senator Lyons and Senator Westman are looking at this. I mean, there's been a lot of controversy, obviously, around the recommended use of the opioid abatement special fund.
Although even that,
You could create.
it's not as controversial as one would read in the.
I don't always believe everything I read in the media, since I've been called a loser, disappointment, and liar. Beat that.
It's all the same, Art?
No, over time.
Uh,
But I was also accused of leading an economic assault on the most economically oppressed women in the state. So I've got, that is bad. I'm really, yes.
You should get benched.
Well,
Not mentioned at all.
Right, let's see who.
yeah, all right. We understand your concern.
Yeah.
Okay. And, why did they do this? I'm understanding, they're trying to free up money for something else. And, we need to figure that out.
Remain silent about why, but I can tell you.
Why?
Begins with a J, and that's.
Not the J word.
Well, I do.
Not get the J word there.
All right.
I, in the interest of
I'm sorry,
transparency.
pardon us for our
and-
levity.
No, I will just say that I would hate to see the cannabis revenues go the way of the tobacco revenues. Where we know that every state in the country used tobacco revenues for everything but tobacco programs. They used it for paying the bills. And this law in Vermont was put into place at least so a significant proportion would go into prevention, which is highly commendable, and we shouldn't depart from that.
No, actually, some of the other things, I realize the amount of money right now, when we start getting up to 10 million, because I had suggested we ought to look at. Certainly, we're funding after-school programs, but that is out of, a different, well, that's sales tax. So, but the 10 million, you know, we've had discussions around mentoring, for example. That's a wonderful preventive, primary prevention. But right now, I don't know what the anticipated revenues are coming in at relative to that 10 million cap. You know what they're projected to be?
They're better than anticipated.
I know that sales are good. I even have a cannabis store in Danville. I want you to know. See, I mean,
We call
Danville has
that,
everything.
we call that health equity.
I see. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'll just stop in.
You're getting a lot bigger local.
Well, as long as New Hampshire messing it up, you'll have to sail on your side.
So-
At least one reason for the.
And plus the scenery. So, you had other concerns as well, Commissioner?
That was my major concern. I know you had other concerns about the opioid settlement fund monies, abatement monies.
Well, I'm
So
gonna,
I'm not gonna comment on those things. I'll be here to answer.
well, I'm relying on two members of the committee to sort this all out, figure out how the money got, moved around. We've got a problem here with, our pharmacy bill that we passed using the same funding source that would be depleted. So we've got a number of areas that we've got to crosswalk. In terms
It'll
of.
work out.
Thank you then for coming in on that. Obviously, this is, the intent was to have some stable funding, and it seems like the question is, what we are able to add to the 3 million for the coalition. My question is, so much evidence base really depends on fidelity to the model. So my question really becomes one, how are you evaluating the impact that the community coalitions are having relative to health outcomes?
That's a great question. So there's an entire infrastructure that's been developed around them. The acronym is VLPO. Acronym, right?
Yeah.
Which is the Vermont Leadership Prevention Organization, something like that, which really looks at it on a statewide basis and a region-wide basis, and makes sure that as funding is dispersed to all of the various coalitions around the state, that they are adhering to the same model, which is the Strategic Prevention Framework model from the CDC. It's gotten evaluated over the last several decades, so it's not like you have to put a totally new evaluation in place, because that continues on.
It seems like we have a lot of inputs, but I sometimes find our outputs are a little hard to discern.
Well, I mean, each coalition still looks at high school and middle school rates of cannabis uptake, nicotine uptake, alcohol uptake. And we find incredibly clear correlations between times that funding is robust and times when funding has been interrupted for whatever reason. You suddenly lose the down curve on take of all these substances and it starts to go the wrong way. And then funding gets restored, it goes away.
But funding is only, funding in and of itself shouldn't be the determining factor.
No,
I
no,
think-
but it's a correlation, as I
Yeah.
pointed out, but if
Access to addictive substances.
No, I think it's all, it's not only access. Our teens have access to every temptation there is to humanity, whether we're talking about sexual behavior, whether we're talking about substance use, whether we're talking about, we know, the profile of Vermonters who die in car accidents in their age, and we know that they're predominantly young men, rural areas in a pickup truck. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we know. So the question becomes not one of.
Yeah.
It's what are those strategic interventions?
Right.
What makes a difference in terms of making healthy decisions? And it seems like if you're making sound decisions in one part of your life, it probably translates to other parts.
So a lot of it has to do with the mental health status of our teens and adolescents, has to do with how much they feel or don't feel valued by their
Well, I'm
community.
reading a prayer for a city, and it has to do with the decline of the city of Philadelphia. And it's a very interesting, and the mayor, Ed Rendell, who came in, and it was, that city went through
Yeah.
tremendous, and the rise in crime, the rise in
Right.
drug use, et cetera, so.
So much of it has to do with what else is there to do. So during those third space
We need
hours.
more farmers, because when you're a farm kid, you're busy and tired by the end of the day.
Yes.
That would be my
So it's
strategy.
really during those 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. time frames, when you could be out experimenting and getting an STI or.
We know that, we had that debate on the
using
purpose of our
medication.
after-school programs.
Right. So all this is part of the big picture.
Um,
Feeling better about yourself, feeling better about your place in the community, and having a community that listens to you and provides you with the activities that you want to actually do.
this committee will probably need some therapeutic intervention by the time we finish our work here.
Yeah.
So I'm going
I
to
can ask the
suggest,
virtual.
It's the Vermont Prevention League organization.
Leader.
Do we qualify?
so I'm gonna suggest that we, let the commissioner, who may have other business to conduct, here in Montpelier, I'm not sure, it's nice to see you in person, so. I'm going to suggest that if we don't have any further questions, we take a break and then we will come back. In about 20 minutes and we'll just start grinding through, one times and C and D sections of the budget. Thank you.
And I would just ask that you look carefully at some of the ways the legislature, the other,